great cultural theorist, Fred Jameson, who was negotiating to go as the most highly paid humanities professor in the States to UCLA, and engaged in a complicated negotiation. Not only did he get the highest salary, but having settled the money, this salary, he also said then that he wanted to bring his wife onto the faculty with a high salary as well. Finally, in exasperation, the Vice-Chancellor, or the equivalent of Vice-Chancellor at UCLA, said, "I'd like to remind you that we were offering you a chair, not a sofa." At this point, I'll ask Sally to start. I think we should listen to Sally, then there should be comments from those who have particular reasons to think about sofas, and then thanks to Sapporo Pia, we can break for a drink before the audience is encouraged, indeed compelled, to give some of the most embarrassing confessions about their relations to sofas.
Thanks so much. Welcome everybody, and I suspect none of you are here, you're all here for the word sofa. None of you are here. If I was in search of a chair, I reckon maybe a quarter of you would be here at the most. Is everybody going to be able to hear me? If I shout, right. Can you dim the lights, please? Now, the chair, I'm going to start very briefly with the chair. The chair is undoubtedly one of the, if not the, 20th century design icons. It's arguably a microcosm of design philosophy for architects, industrial designers, chair designers. We start here with Mies van der Rohe's chairs. Peter Smithson, architect, describes how really when one starts designing a chair as an architect, you're designing a miniature city. Everything is wrapped up into the one object, so it's a very pure design thought process that goes on. Similarly, Ford's chaise contour. Is that right?
Grand
No. Who's, sorry?
Grand Comfort.
Thank you, Grand Comfort. We have had a lot of it. Of course, Grand Comfort were designed 2 years earlier. They are the ultimate sort of luxurious, elegant symbol of the international style that was happening in the late 20s, early 30s. Here we have the Barcelona chair, which was in fact designed for the Barcelona Pavilion. It was actually for the King of Spain, King Alfonso, and his queen to sit side by side in the pavilion at the opening of the Barcelona Pavilion. It was a symbol of, in a sense, it's a modernist throne. Apparently, it uses traditional fabrication methods, the irony of the chair, a symbol of modernism. In fact, made very expensively and greatly practical. So, really, we're looking here at the chair as a symbol of power and status and individualism. And what I want to talk today about is why the sofa has nothing like that kind of status. It has yet to sort of migrate from the crappy high street shop, but actually is a major part of our lives. and I suspect why a lot of you are here. Togetherness. Liz and her ninth husband, I think it's nine? Larry Portensky from Ghana. The man on the right. So, really there's a whole kind of contrast going on really with the chair and the sofa. The sofa is a symbol of security for the Midland Bank campaign. Here they use the sofa you saw on the previous slide, and the computer graphics, I suspect. They scanned in the sofa as a symbol of security and comfort, stability. But I mean, if one's driving past this building with 90 miles an hour, I suppose, you know, all you see, literally, all you see is a sofa and you think home, security. Similarly, loot all your worldly goods. Now, this Farmer's Jeans campaign, the latest campaign, is Mary Campbell. In the 90s version of the Christine Cuba you see on the bottom left-hand corner. So the chair is a symbol of sex and glamour. Then maybe the sofa is about coziness and togetherness, partnerships and practices, family values. We're not just a laugh, this is a guide camp. Some of these slides that I have come from, there's a big box of photographs outside Boots the chemist. Presumably when people don't pick up their photographs, Boots maybe keep them for 3 months and then they just chuck them all out. And I have a box of hundreds of photographs at home, which I combed through people's lives, literally their weddings, funerals, sports days. And there are hundreds and hundreds of people on sofas, and it's really, really interesting. And there's a few coming up, that's why they're sort of... If anyone recognises any of these things, I'd really like to know. So how to find you? So really, we're talking about the sofa as a kind of homely presence in the room. Again, the chair by many photographers, they get their subjects to pose on the chair. The chair is a symbol of individualism. Marriage. Individualism verging on ego, I suppose. That's probably the correct chair. So it's a sofa about coupledom and partnerships and equality. Ultimately. We're drowning in the cushions of a secure home. The chair's also been seen for designers as a kind of heroic expression, I suppose. These chairs were designed in the 50s by a couple from New York, Laverne, in the late 50s. I think they were trying to achieve the invisible chair. This is a classic 80s design. Angela Bryan. Apparently they're all one-offs. They're made by blacksmiths in the Dordogne, very 80s. Word design. Tom, who is fashionably late today, poetic emotional line, so they say. I think they were done in the late 80s again. Designers have just taken the chair and wrapped it in shape. They've wrapped it in string. This rather absurd chair was designed by a guy who used to work for Philip Stark.
Christian Gavois.
Thank you, Gavois. A prompt, isn't it? It's a bit like Granny's armchair on steroids or something, and I think he was trying to reinvent the homeliness of the chair. But I mean, they're great heroic gestures, really. They have a great presence. Maurice and Bonetti, French tea, Paris tea. This is in their primitive Brazilian stage. They kind of caveman aesthetic, they live in savage aesthetic and stuff in the Paris night and other things. So, I mean, really, for decades, designers have been reinventing chairs in some great heroic way. But they sort of seem to be neglected, really. Obviously, there are design sofas, but it has a kind of comic, suburban sort of side in contrast with the chair. Again, this is from that series. People on the self-time. Bit of a snark on the side. Mommies and daddies on the sofa. The family room. And then literally there are hundreds of these. I haven't unfortunately got one of them. So it's a rather bad slide of neighbours. I mean, in many soap operas, the sofa is, if you like, the main setting for domestic drama. I mean, the Cosby Show, the Golden Girls, all the soaps tend to take place around the sofa rather than at the door of the room. But the sofa somehow is a symbol of the family, and all activity takes place on it. Arguments, sex, whatever it happens to be, takes place right here. This is, I sat watching breakfast TV the other morning. It seems to me that from like 8:30 to maybe 11:30 in the morning, most television takes place on the sofa. And a yellow one. This is a quiz game in the mornings. Each contestant gets their own sofa. They don't have to share it. So I suppose it's kind of, it's on our TV screens all the time. It's kind of casual and informal discussion. Readers' wives. Somebody told me a great story, it may well be another myth, that a guy was flipping through Playboy and didn't recognise his wife, but recognised their sofa before he recognised their wife. So yes, there are designer sofas. This one is boomerang sofa, Massimo Seguini. He is concerned with the staticness of the sofa, constantly in all his furniture, looking at the whole movement aspect. Everything he does seems to move. he calls it a Taplin sofa. It's based on the Russian constructor tower. Sure, it's desperately uncomfortable, but it's a structural object. I mean, people are tackling them, but apparently, you can all help me with it, I'm afraid. I don't think British people like designer sofas. They have a bit of a problem with it. And I think it's important to realise that there's more to the sofa than two chairs pushed together. The dynamics of a relationship and a couple and their moods and the way that they sit together and the way that they row together, and the sofa as this very rich sort of setting. One can't simply just fuse two chairs together. This, if anybody's interested, one of French designers, Alexis Lalette, I think it's called. It was done in the early 90s. And he designs earrings and everything. And he's quite happy that it's desperately uncomfortable thing to sit and watch telly out of the mansion. Anyway, the British have none of this. The French loved it. Now, buying a sofa seems to be a very traumatic thing. Again, Craig, I think it's got a number of stories about couples in the National on Saturdays. Third party to a lot of arguments. I think a lot of people feel that buying a sofa, well, on the one hand, suddenly you're terribly grown up when you buy a sofa. You enter a whole different world. It's seriously big amount of money that you're crashing out. Are you going to be able to live with the decision? And more to the point, how do you want other people to see you? When they walk into your living room, what sort of a couple are you? Are you a designer couple? Incidentally, these two people, I don't know if they're here, teach here, or certainly used to teach here. They are the AA designer couple. They're called so far. Or are you a respectable couple? Colin Moynihan here with, I think that's his wife, but at the time as the photograph was just about to break that he was having an affair with the secretary. Or you just a laid back, old rocker kind of couple. David Cassidy pictured there. Sprawly kind of couple, grey long. And I think mental health is really important, and I think that often one partner bullies the other into the kind of decision that they make. Or you're really committed kind of couple. Actually, Liz is every other style. Again, here with Larry on the patio. Again, an aristocratic, serious kind of couple. Andrew Ridgely on the left with Tony from Bananarama, is that right? But they're just good friends. Now all these pictures that we're flicking through, Ken Russell, complexion matches the sofa. with his new wife, baby on the way, his new wife is younger than his son. All these pictures are taken from Hello. And the reason that I became so interested in the sofa is because, as Mark said, I was looking at Hello magazine as a really interesting source of looking into people's homes and looking at their lives. And what started to come out was that Hello has this incredible formula for life. And in a sense, the celebrities in Hello are all on a journey. And it's a very torturous journey. There's inevitably sex and drugs and huge amounts of alcohol and tears on the way. But they're all in search of the sofa, which is where the title comes from. Once they make it to the sofa, they call up Hello magazine. It's the lady from Hello in the head. they call up in the magazine and say, right, we want to do an interview, and they've made it to the sofa. And so the sofa is the kind of the ultimate setting from which to proclaim the wonders of togetherness. And literally week after week after week, couples with or without babies, holding hands, smiling, they've made it to the sofa. Michael Douglas, bit of a scandal brewing about his marriage, thought he'd better be pictured with his wife on the sofa. And even looks like it's rigged up in the studio, I think, isn't it, like their sofa? I mean, every sofa has a story, but often within a matter of weeks, whatever they've been saying on this particular sofa, all goes wrong in a matter of a week or two. They turn out to be unfaithful, gay, whatever it is. And in a way, by getting to the sofa, you've supposedly reached this sort of superficial destination. And really what I'm looking at today is the fact that if the sofa is about the furniture, togetherness, and togetherness is a very complicated thing, Hello presents it as a very simplistic, formulaic thing. And in fact it's not, and I think that designers really need to respond to it and look at that. I forget, it's a long time, the swatches on the table, and then just look it up and reminding everybody in. Everybody's favourite Nigel Hayden. And the way that they sit together as well, the body language of what they're saying about just be friends or America's highest paid country emergency singer, Kenny Rogers. Who lives in this hideous mansion. I'd really like to start showing all those photos. Olga Corbett, who hangs out in all her aerobics and Chelsea gear, apparently at home in something of her own. Stephanie, Princess Stephanie, who defied Prince Rainier and married her body and then went and had a baby and definitely disgraced the royal family of Monaco. And finally, Andrew Fergie. Andrew was quoted, wonderful caption under this: "Marrying Sarah was the best decision I ever made." So all of these couples, all of them together, really we're looking at this whole idea that Hello breaks down into a hierarchy of characters, all in search of the sofa. There's a cast of characters, sorry, with a hierarchy, and they're all in search of the sofa. And what I briefly want to look at is how that hierarchy works, what the various journeys are involved to get to the sofa, to make it that far, and for however long you get to stay on it. Starting with Hello's absolute favourite, the goddess of virtue, elegance, and style, and English readiness, Guy, who is literally in every week. She's always hugging sick children and shaking hands with people who suffer from AIDS, and Hello absolutely adored her. She really is at the top of the kind of celebrity league in terms of what the public feel Britain is about. Being squeezed by a narrow shape there, and spotted a gap at the side of the sofa. Also, she has this, that's a bad slide, but she has this tremendous Barbie doll appeal. They have this wonderful section where you can vote for your favourite outfit. And then they have, all these columns and fill in, and 9 out of 10 Jennings circle. And they really have these amazing competitions. And so she really is the kind of out-and-out celeb goddess, top of the league star. Slightly further down, although still quite high up there and often featured, is Barbara Carrera, who's kind of sort of, I think it's better, aging ex-model turned Bond girl, who is a kind of professional single ex-Bond girl, and is currently courting she's a Westminster, the most British Miss Elizabeth actually. She's perfect for Hello in that she's a Nicaraguan orphan who's wandering the streets of Paris and discovered. I mean, it's a completely sort of Cinderella fairy tale rise to fame. And here she is again, just good friends. She's probably right there on chairs here and not a sofa. There's no bottom there. Now, the Margaret of Blandford. Kind of a tragic case. Barney was fellow, exactly. He's going to Narcotics Anonymous 3 times a week. He's going to inherit Blenheim Palace and a multi-million-pound fortune, but he keeps getting sent to jail and he can't get it together, but he chooses this moment in his life to call Hello and do the interview. I'm clean, I'm not doing drugs anymore. And apparently 3 weeks later, he's back in this land. Then, sort of, in a sense, at the bottom of the hierarchy is the kind of somebody, you don't necessarily know who this is. This is Mandy Smith's mum, Patsy Smith. Mandy Smith, who married Bill Wyman. They're fairly obscure, and here she is in her North London chintzy hat. Now, we don't necessarily need to know her, but we all know somebody like her. With her horrid dog. She's talking about how she can't bear the press, it's such an invasion of one's privacy, and here she's on the cover of Hello. How she's marrying Bill Wyman's son. So there's a rather complicated, potentially incestuous family tree about to occur here. So really, having sort of shown the kind of stratification of the Hello hierarchy that is at work, the cast of characters are all in search of a soap. They're all on a journey. And the journeys fall into, if you want to push it, quite kind of classical themes. If you look at mythology, there are ways of getting to the ultimate destination, and this is a contemporary form of mythology. Hello has kind of taken on through. It's a formula approach whereby there are 3 categories, the way that I see it, if you like. It fits quite neatly. Shame and honour is the first one. Celebrities have done a terrible thing, and they need to use Hello in order to repent, like. This is the First Lady of Indonesia, Dewi Sukarno. She's in her country club prison cell in Aspen, in Hello. She is standing trial for mashing a broken glass into her best friend's face, and presents this incredible 2-page account of why it was the other person's fault. It's really extraordinary. But Hello managed to make that work. Somehow she manages to persuade us that she is a victim, in fact, and that her honour is preserved. Folly and wisdom is another sort of formula category on the journey to the sofa. Robin Williams, described as the wild man of Hollywood, was earning so much money at the age of 26, he couldn't put enough cocaine up his road. And suddenly discovered the nanny, who was his aunt's around the road. His marriage was completely on the rocks. He marries the nanny within a week of divorcing his wife, I think. He gets very upset with the press for insinuating he didn't have an affair with marriage. And he uses Hello magazine to say, I don't do coke anymore, and I don't drink anymore, I'm completely teetotal. He's bought this vineyard in Napa Valley in California, and he just doesn't touch a drop. And he just says, give me a beautiful day and my kids, and I'm a happy man. So again, it's a kind of classic theme, and if you look through Hello, you'll find that other people slot into this kind of folly and wisdom, shame and honour kind of formula theme. This woman, they have before and after pictures. I wasn't cruel enough to show you the before. This is Marlon Brando's first wife, who now pictured in a trailer park. She cleans trailers for $5 an hour. And again, she's using Hello to express her anger at the press for portraying her as a hopeless mother and a drug addict. And, it's basically Marlon's fault, of course. And here she is with her spaniel in her trailer, having spent all the money, possibly on drugs when they go to surgery. Finally, Glenn Ford, 76-year-old Glenn Ford, with his Benny Hill nurse, who's perched on an ottoman at his side. He was desperate to marry any blonde nurse. In fact, he phoned all the blonde nurses he had. I didn't get this in Hello, this is another source. And in a desperate attempt to remedy old age, I suspect. And they're pictured here in their Beverly Hills mansion at the wedding ceremony. And they're not taking a honeymoon, they just want to be together, spend some time together. And the wonderful thing about this story is that it all seems so absurd and so good to be true. But 3-4 weeks later, it was leaked that in fact, the lady on the left, his nurse, had immediately sued him for non-consummation of the marriage and wanting half of his multi-million-pound fortune for him. Rather tragic. But in a way, a lot of these couples that we're looking at, what I've been studying is this whole idea that they're on a quest for happiness and togetherness. And the sofa, if you like, is the furniture of that, the expression of that. And really, for designers to be snooty, if you like, about the sofa, in the sense that it's some sort of, it's something a bit complicated, it's a compromise. A chair is a very pure design challenge. The sofa, it's about the messiness of a relationship, people falling out. It's not so pure. And some of the drawings I was doing in my last year here were looking at the idea of the politics of the sofa, and in fact that what's actually going on in a lot of these photographs, there's much more to it than what I mentioned earlier, 2 chairs pieced together. It's actually something which should really respond to the mood, who's feeling active, who's feeling passive, who's feeling grungy, and who's feeling brave. And we all know that relationships are really complicated things, and that the furniture about relationships should actually take that on board. And I really feel that designers don't really do that. And I'd like to close on this cartoon, which Susanna and Dominic here commissioned me to design a sofa for them, for their new place. They, like me, feel that to go out and buy one doesn't really fulfill their requirements. When you're in a relationship, maybe one of you feels like watching telly, the other one wants to just smoke quietly, whatever it is. You know, a piece of furniture that should really respond to what's going on. This obviously is a cartoon of the kind of physical possibilities around. But I think that if you're terribly cynical, then the reason that the architectural, the design furniture profession don't take on board design of sofas, and I think it's rather beneath them, is because it's kind of a compromise. And to design a chair is a very pure, absolute, simple thing, and yet so it's kind of messy, and so really my sort of feeling about that is that it should actually be a challenge, and it should be something that we, given the richness of the territory of the sofa, it's something that really we should actually think a lot more about. Okay, thanks.
Okay, well, we have like about an hour to try and kind of open up some of the issues. Maybe first of all, before we throw it over to the audience, I could ask the invited guests.
Celebrity panel.
Celebrity panel. Any sofa humans.
Piers.
Why me first?
Go on.
I don't know anything about sofa. I don't have a sofa at home, and I'm married, and obviously the marriage is going to last. You know, it's never been fiction on sofa, we can't be fiction on sofa. So I think we're quite confident, we're strangely confident. However, we do have sofas at the office, which is a nice reversal, I think. And I read a very good obituary of a man who died recently in the Times. He wasn't really famous for anything except that his army kit was cut like civilian clothes, and his civilian clothes were cut like army kit should be. And this is why he was famous for getting the wrong way round. And it seems to me that was quite a good analogy with having the sofa in the wrong place. The point about a sofa, is, of course, is that you're just highly vulnerable on the sofa. You haven't got you can't get up fast enough for a start. And it seems to me that the sofa's body language is one of supplication. You know, yeah, I mean, kind of like like you're weak. And one of the reasons, of course, you put a sofa in the entrance hall of an office is if you want to dominate people who come to see you, because you take, well, come to my office, and they're kind of like, oh shit, it's absolutely impossible to get up decently without showing you the tops of your socks. I mean, you can't look good getting up out. I swear you can't look good getting up out of the sofa unless you roll onto the floor. It's the next best move. So it seems to me sofas are all about vulnerability, and that's why what their role is really, is that you're giving yourself up, and that's why, of course, you keep the photograph on the sofa rather than a chair, which tends to make you look domineering, important, singular. A sofa, I think, has the quality of you've given yourself into the sofa. So if you want to be straightforwardly sort of old-fashionedly analogous about it, I suppose it's a feminine object. And rather than masculine one. And that's probably why designers find it so difficult to look at. Because architects particularly can only, anyway, do curves in one direction. They can never do three-dimensional curves. They can't handle it. They can only work with a curve going one way.
Because most architects are men as well.
Yeah, well, quite, exactly. And we can only do planes. We can bend a plane, but that's all we can do. We can't possibly get into three-dimensional. Please, you can't draw it apart from anything else. It's a nightmare. So sofas, which are essentially soft, of course architects don't design sofas. I mean, because they can't do soft things anyway. No knowledge, no ability. This is very Latin. This is really I went to a theatre, I went to a matinee in Windsor. A friend of mine was in a play. And in the entrance foyer, and in all the corridors leading to the theatre, are photographs of previous productions, as you would expect, going right back to the 1920s. And there are only two sorts of play that have ever been put on in Windsor. Shakespeare and plays with sofas. And there are no Shakespeare plays with sofas. And there are no plays that aren't Shakespeare without a sofa. I mean, those are the only two, you know, I think that defines life, really. There's Shakespeare, i.e., very fine writing, and then there's sofas, and the two never mix. But as far as Windsor's concerned, there is nothing else. In some of the places have two sofas, very daring. The only thing you can do with a sofa, of course, on a theatre stage is put it that way, or that way, or, very daringly, diagonally. No sofa ever faced backwards to the audience, because the back of the sofa is a non-event. Yeah, I mean, the backs of sofas don't exist, more or less. They're still very baroque. They face like an old piece of furniture, like a chest of drawers, where they face one way. They very seldom have a back presence, and that spiral one was one of the first ones I've seen that has a real three-dimensional presence.
That the thing I'm looking at with Susanna and Dominic is the idea of a sofa which is more than just two people sitting side by side, and you know, they see the world in a way, and it's very blinkered kind of. We are a couple, we see the world in this direction together. You know.
Yes.
Maybe if the arms swivel out, you can actually take on board a bit more of the world.
Well, of course, the sofa is probably just as good if you flip it on its back. It's probably just as useful.
But the
shop there,
is like the real meaning of the House of Windsor, which is like a sofa pretending to be
Shakespeare and sofa. That's me.
Well, I was just going to sort of say that from a point of view of a design historian, working at Piers Gough, Mackereth, where are my roots, you've got two problems with a sofa. You've got the fact that when you redesign a sofa, there's no point, because I mean, you ask anybody who works in the shop that sells sofas, and they say it's got to be a beach frame, it's got to be a particular sort of frame with upholstery. That is the definition of a sofa. Whatever you do on top, you're not making a sofa, you're making a settle that sits in some sort of office, you know, entrance. All those modern sofas, that's what I think that they are.
So it's a build-up of
They're not
layers
sofas.
of stuff. You mean it's a frame with the layers?
Yeah.
It's a casting couch or
All those other things.
a shades long.
Sofas.
It's a shades long.
They're shades or they're, you know, ottomans or all these different words for them.
Yeah. I mean, technically, are those things which are upright with wooden legs and a frame round here where you can see the frame? Is that a sofa or is that called something else?
I don't know.
The things that Royal
photographs, and I think most people's associations, sofa equals some kind of comfort. So deep upholstered, and I'm not sure what all the other words are. I was having my mother's French, and I was having a discussion with her about some translation a while ago, and it emerged that there were something like, we found 20 odd words, different French words, to define a thing on which more than one person will sit.
Whereas in this country, it's I think it's very class orientated. It's a sofa or it's a couch.
Right.
But
there's a very limited choice of words, and the French had a significant array of words from which you could choose, and I suspect a lot of them go back to another era altogether. And if you look at what the unit on which more than two people can sit was in France, say, in the 18th century, and how it fitted into the rituals of court life. And it was something quite different from the family associated thing that you have been talking about, or the couple. That it was a piece of furniture for a very public place, and the way people reacted on it was part of the very public sort of social interaction.
Not necessarily to do with conflict.
Nothing at all.
We're talking about salon kind of.
Yeah. So, but to come back to what is a sofa, I think the popular perception of that word in this country is the kind of squidgy thing that we are comfortably ensconced on, and comfort, and therefore...
This is very demonstrative, actually. I mean, one of the things about sofas is that very few people in this country sit on them. Sofas are not satisfying. That's everything. But how they sit on it and how they perceive it as comfortable is a long way from conventional notions of comfort. Because
It's not ergonomically sensible.
ergonomics have absolutely nothing to do with comfort. Comfort is largely a visual phenomenon. If somebody thinks that a thing is comfortable, they'll find a way of sitting on it.
Well, it's largely a kind of psychic question. I mean, it's difficult to look at you kind of inhabiting the sofa like that without thinking that you've just killed your parents.
Oh no!
Well, it's interesting that this sofa, you see, it does say it's nudging the limits. You're quite right, actually, because there are some extraordinary rules about sofas. If you have to design or develop sofas to sell, as I do, there's a rule book, and it's not very long. There are things in it like you must have separate seat cushions, like those three do. It doesn't. And it must have virtually no space underneath it. You mustn't be able to see underneath it.
What is that?
Because comfort involves going to the ground. It must be planted firmly
Like a
on the
tree.
ground.
Which is the problem with buying a sofa, because you think that it's this huge sort of weight that's dragging you down.
Yeah.
If you buy a sofa, that's it, you're going to stay in one place for your
Oh
whole
no!
life.
Have you bought one,
It's
Liz?
your comfort. No, they can get in the door.
That's why you have scatter cushions, which are much lighter. So you can kind of throw
And then you
scatter
can-
cushions around.
you can chuck them out and you
so
can't
forth, you
move
can't
them.
move because it's too
You can also
heavy.
spread your territory like that.
I think there's something really important that you've missed out if you're trying to develop a social history of a sofa in domestic space, which is the television. And actually, when does that? Because for the sofa to appear in domestic space, I mean, if you look at the development of those interiors, part of the reason, I think, why there aren't sofas in those early modern interiors in many respects is because there isn't actually a space for it. There actually has to be a space that develops for a sofa. But if you, in terms of its concentration in domestic interiors, although the shots you showed us were in large houses, we were always looking at those people from the viewpoint of the television.
Right.
That's quite a good point, really.
The television does have a direct effect on the design of sofas, actually. It's very interesting, as everything in England does, it has a social dimension. In that, I talk to a lot of manufacturers who make sofas for different parts of the market, and we, like our manufacturers, consider it a bit weird because we don't really like anybody else. But one of the major requirements they all have is that it must have a high back. And people sit in sofas and they nestle their shoulders into them and they put their head back like that, they bang on the back like that, and they adopt television position.
With the chips in one hand and the flag
If
in
they
the other.
can't, they say this sofa is not right. It's not right. Now, this curious.
Do they know why it's not right, or is it just an
No, they know.
intuitive?
They actually test drive, they get into
This is no good for watching the sofa.
Yeah.
It doesn't support my. Now, in a different part of the market, in the sort of the part of the market that we come from, people have that in their mind, but they would never say it. They would never admit it.
We don't watch television,
Don't watch
we listen to
television.
Shostakovich.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
They won't acknowledge the importance of television in the room anyway. And they say, I have a very small black and white.
Let me bring the portable up.
Oh yes, the Gulf War and things.
Yeah.
But interestingly, what they want in terms of, it's very difficult to design an elegant high back sofa. Most people's idea of elegance in a sofa is a low back. So you've got a real contradiction there between comfort and what's elegant. And in the end, most people sacrifice that market for the elegance at that part of the market, and then jump into the next section of it, completely over, and they will never buy a low back sofa because the television is so important.
Or you get those sofas that actually the back sort of goes up at such an angle that you really are just almost lying in bed.
Which you are.
Yeah. But it helps with the shorts, you know.
So I did resent. I think this whole conversation couched and so forth. I think this conversation would be more aggressive if you lot weren't sitting down there. I mean, I quite resenting to stand up and we're
You were
all
late, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I know. But I suspect that if you were all sitting on bar stools, this conversation would have a different.
Much more perchy, yes.
Yeah.
Why don't we
Right.
come
So
to
why don't you just all get up and
We can't.
I've never felt so relaxed in my
purposeful act in front of an audience.
Precisely. It's a full sense of security, and I think
Somebody's making a
Sure,
good.
Yeah.
I think the point you were making about architects not being able to take on the challenge of designing a sofa because they're not sculptors, is a very interesting one. And yet they can sculpt a chair. And the problem of the back is also, and there is a piece of furniture which exists, which is the sofa table, which I'm not sure which came first, but I imagine that the sofa was designed, there was the problem of that dead space, and there is a piece of traditional furniture which is a rectangular table, which kind of takes your eye and whole function one step beyond and solves that dead thing.
Oh, you want everybody on the same sofa?
No, totally.
I mean, I'm just looking through all those slides. I found it fascinating to see that the chairs that we had chosen were, at the beginning to illustrate, were very much quote-unquote designed. They were kind of self-consciously designed in different ways. And not one of the sofas seemed to be designed in that same way. It was as if its form had come about by a consensus of people's requirements. And that, which is a kind of design. It's another way of getting there.
But this is a very national-specific thing, because the reason one of the reasons why sofas are not going to be making many designs in Britain, most other countries, is that more than anything else, I think the sofa is that area where people are. I mean, one of the things that the British public are terrified of, above all else in their domestic environment, is appearance to be self-conscious. And if you have a sofa that's designed,
hideously self-conscious about this.
massively self-conscious statement of design, so in that area where they want the most informality. But in other countries they don't have that problem. They have completely different set of rules, and designers have a certain problem with sofas. They have here too. But the problem is they often have gone about designing them by breaking all the rules I started to talk about.
Yeah.
This is in fact an example of a designing the sofa by a known designer that does actually sell, my God, which is really quite remarkable. And it also gets close to breaking most of them. That's good.
Just now you've said that, I'm interested in your thoughts on this strange space in between, three people, between here.
That's the little brother.
No, it isn't actually. Even though the resolution, if someone tries to sit in the palm, you get slightly. I mean, the whole thing is that.
You get up then if somebody sits
Yeah, you get up. You've done quite. Although it's made, I mean, it's big enough for three. It becomes terribly ill at ease when three sit in it. And this space in between is a very interesting social space. Isn't it? You too close down. And I wonder if in certain nations it gets slightly larger. Britain actually probably wants as large as space.
It does. It wants massive sofas. Huge sofas.
It's a little bit too intimate, isn't it?
Yeah.
France
Well,
probably
it's very hard to be the person in the middle, isn't it?
But
It's
yes.
like a ping pong ball.
Yeah.
Oh, did you? All right. It's behind you. Right. Yeah, I mean, it's that. I think it's just very difficult three matches. Probably three people in a row.
But it's a social, they're really designed for two,
Yeah,
aren't they?
so they should be.
And the social space is essentially a space of
third
tension,
person, it should be
divides
bent
relationship
enough.
in some way.
It should be bent enough for the third person to get in there. But
The sitting in the line is never very comfortable anyway.
No, and it's very hard to have a conversation in the line.
Yeah. I think really we're talking about the furniture, for two. The couple really is kind of what's interesting.
But they're big enough for three, who knows the dilemma.
It's not because
There's a kind of silent presence there, you're all
Yeah.
slightly ill at ease with.
Then there's the whole world of the three-piece suite.
It's just lovely.
But I think Alan's absolutely right. I mean, it reminds me like of when Proust's mother was dying. I think she had various grand old sofas, and Marcel was absolutely too. She compelled him to swear that he would look after them, and he said, in his own way, "I certainly will." And when she died, he actually, in order to use these sofas, he funded the establishment of a male brothel. So that they sure as hell would get looked after. And that was his sort of last and great
That's
rebellion
sex on the sofa.
against the law, against the third space.
Because that's one thing you were saying, it was a homely thing, it was nothing to do with sex. But people go through their stage in their life, but what they do is they pile all the clothes onto the single chairs when a girl comes out. Just on the sofa.
Well, in that respect, I think sofas have a lot in common with the back seats of cars. They're probably
Not anymore, can you cry from the back? It's very well so.
We designed a sofa once that looked like the back seat of a car.
yeah.
I think
Well,
it was
American cars used to have a continuous sofa in the front. They were real cars.
Yeah.
I mean, they were.
When cars were cars.
When cars were cars, it was three in the garage in front.
I think we should invite everyone to have a drink and resume in about 5 minutes' time when the audience should contribute. Okay. Sally has a strong need for more anthropological material.
Confession.
We wanted more context. To kind of save them doing so much field work.
Okay, Sally, you start.
I've discovered,
Sorry?
I think one thing I've discovered, having a studied leather sofa at home, is that it's wonderfully resistant to every kind of food. And one thing we haven't discussed is using a sofa as your dining room. We do. It's a family eating place. And everything that would be really quite delicious on fabric actually seems to nourish the heart. So,
Right. That's olive oil, finest cold salmon vinegar. Yeah. It's sort of picnicking, isn't it? Because you don't want to get up. I mean, fake to get up. You ruin the whole thing. As you get up, the cushion changes shape, whatever the dinner goes over. I mean, the whole thing about it.
That and the television are very much to do with changing patterns, acceptable changing patterns of living, with more and more formality, less rigid ways of.
But also,
And also it's more and more
it's
static, isn't it? It's less and less about getting up and walking about and moving around. It's more and more about being a couch potato.
Perhaps your family, but you don't need to talk around it. Produce the conversation for you. That's why you just sit there and you do
Talk
not
back.
do that.
Yeah.
You just watch it occur in front of you.
My New Year's resolution is to hire a video recorder, like, playback thing. So I'm always listening to films and that kind of stuff. So then, about a fortnight later, I just want that. A fortnight later, it's like, God, we've got to get a proper sofa because we don't have one.
To watch these films?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
We have a sort of rolled up futon with, like, every opportunity I get, I buy another cushion to go on it. So it gets more like a net. And then spent months and weeks and whatever looking for a sofa and decided that, horror of horrors, the door wasn't big enough to get one in. I went off the house and it's just like, that was it, like, oh my God.
No, we've got all this new video machine with no sofa.
So we've got a big chair, which means that now our relationship is breaking up because I'm sitting in the chair and he's back on the sofa.
I've got a great idea. Get him in the chair first.
No, because he
sit on
smokes and I don't allow him to smoke in the chair.
Now we're getting to it.
That's a really good point, though, because there are all these rules about what can happen on the sofa, such as when we're children and pets with
Yeah. Now the rule is that you can smoke on the sofa, but you can't smoke in the new lovely chair that's supposed to manage to squeeze in the door.
My mother bought a sofa, which I'm not allowed to sit on. It's one of those clunky ones that has this stay plump, and I go to get some milk for my coffee. By the time I come back from the kitchen, she's plump.
That's what I do. I have to plump.
This is what you do. This is quite an admission, I think.
There was one program that I thought, with reference to this eating on your sofa. I recall Ruby Wax once did a very revealing interview with her parents back in America, and they saw fit to cover their sofa in thick polythene.
Did they do
Oh,
that?
yeah.
No, it wasn't. No. It wasn't for the, and it wasn't for the cameras. It was. I think,
No, they do that all over. It's like
Why?
you have, and they use plastic mats to preserve it. So
preserve the item.
it's not a question of comfort. When the really important company, like if you have a wedding or something, and the really important company comes over, then you take the plastic off. But you mustn't let the riprap sit on the actual fabric, like your grandchildren or your
That's like how people always kept the kind of polythene covers on car seats, so that it would remain not just new, but pre-new, for as long as possible.
But there's another version of that. It's the ethnic flow.
But what that,
Do that with a sofa.
so what that always, I mean, what hasn't been discussed in a way is the way in which people have pointed out sofas are quite expensive, but there's a certain sense in which it's more movable and less expensive than a home. So it clearly comes simply to symbolise the home. At which point, I mean, since the home is nothing else than a kind of screen for people to project their neuroses on, it takes on all the aspects of the home. So it's your home as long as you don't use it. As long as it's, they said, we've had this sofa for many years actually, which meant no one has ever sat on it, no one's ever been comfortable on it. But it's remained unused. The only time people seem quite comfortable sitting on a chair to really think about it, like a sofa, is in a shop.
Can I ask whether you picked where you're sitting now, or whether you were told to sit where you're sitting?
No, at all. There was a
Why are you sitting on the sofas that you're sitting?
I want to sit there.
This is the most comfortable position.
Right, that's the most comfortable one.
And
isn't it?
Tom, and that's true. I thought that was up to hold the colour. No, Cash, you got your wear? No, not at all.
The most sensible thing would have been to sit on it, which would have meant you wouldn't have to look at it.
But I don't like
No,
it.
but
But it's comfortable.
a home equals one sofa.
Right.
4 sofas equals channel 4. I mean, that's...
Or
No one
two
can afford
sofas.
4 sofas.
One that's covered in polythene in the living room, which nobody ever goes in, and then one in the family room, which is the kitchen table, with, everything. Because they sit and they eat dinner, and I mean, in America, everybody eats dinner in front of the TV on their sofa and their easy chair. The other.
It seems that more people are murdered on sofas than chairs.
Are they really?
How do you know?
How do you know that?
Well, more
enough for
family, all murders are family affairs, aren't they? 90% family affairs, so.
Do you think Mr. Bobby? Yeah. So
Yes, where did Bobbitt do it?
In bed.
Of course.
Yeah, okay, well, what's the relation between the bed and the sofa?
Well, but in terms of photography, you can't photograph a couple in bed in a general interest magazine, so the sofa is the next best thing.
Yeah, we had it over here.
Photographing them together in this sort of scenario.
You got sofa, Tom?
Yeah, but I have to leave some stuff now.
Oh,
Sofa,
you've got one. You admit to it. Is it one that you admit to?
Traditional sofa.
Traditional
I'm not allowed
what?
to have the modern stuff myself at home.
Married.
Difficult, kind of. And what Craig was saying before is hit the nail on the head. Nobody wants a
Design sofas,
sofa.
no.
You can't sell them. You can sell them to, bars and reception areas.
But English people don't.
We can widen that out. Nobody actually wants to design houses either, or
Well, people
homes.
want to inherit.
I was trying to get to mention it. Nobody wants an architect design place to live either. I mean, let's be honest while we're about it. I mean, why did that? No architect worth it who's got any sense or any sense of his own future would follow with housing, for instance. Big boys don't screw around with that, do they? I mean, you don't get your foster worried about mass housing or designing mass housing. I mean, knows which side is bread's buttered, which side is going to produce the goods. And it's just like designers, I can quite just see the sofa as a kind of a black hole which they'll just disappear down if they try and design it.
It's no reason to self-critic, because I know you don't live in a design pad, and I don't have a design sofa, so...
No, I'm self-critic because all I do is design housing. This is like, it's a sort of...
But you don't live in a design house, do you? That's it.
What?
You don't live in an architect's
Oh,
house.
of course not. No.
Architects only live in
No, but, yeah. Well, not my case.
We're digressing from
Sorry.
That's fine, that's fine. No, I have to ask, I mean, is it one that you chose? Or
No.
is it imposed
I
on
wouldn't
you?
have a sofa, I like
You wouldn't have a
beanbags.
sofa? Ah, you're a beanbag man. Because you like to
It's a little comfortable,
reckon. But they're banned from the front room. Or why can't you have beanbags if that's what you want?
Some family.
So the sofa, do you all sit on the sofa?
Yeah.
Is it
Baby
one-
in the middle?
So baby, jumping off it.
Yeah.
One off it.
They do make wonderful family frames, don't
Lots of snot. Yeah, sad.
Well, I worked for years thinking, why am I writing for a design magazine who don't even own a sofa? Don't even own a house.
Do you think
you've only own a car?
Oh, it's really
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I just thought, I go to furniture fairs.
You're not on Freud's couch now.
And I don't really give a shit about the furniture thing.
But if you were to go out and buy one, which Craig described as, well, maybe it's a very traumatic thing, and
What's your problem with sofas anyway? I mean, what?
my problem.
Why have you picked on the sofa? I mean, I still don't understand really. It was more a lecture on Hello Magazine than it was on sofas, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it's the whole idea. The sofa just doesn't have the same kind of status as the chair. Designers don't want to design sofas, but we've all got
What's the
sofas.
Bible say?
Because nobody wants to buy one. We all have to buy one. We all have one. You've got one each.
Right.
So I guess, given that it's such a huge out there money, what sort of sofa do you, as a couple, go out and mutually purchase and agree on to be the kind of couple that you are?
Yeah, but why does it matter to you? That's what I'm asking.
Why does it matter to me? It's fascinating to me.
I think because we're trying to figure out, the sort of underlying meaning of a sofa, and it means more than just something to sit on. It means all those sort of ideas about togetherness, which designers don't really take into account, or they don't do psychology degrees, when they go to design a sofa.
Well, they don't have, they don't know what having a good time is. I mean, one of the interesting things about being a designer is to deny people a good time. I mean, that's the notion of design. If you're a surefire, successful designer, you deny all the pleasures in life. I mean, it's notable that architects are extremely bad at giving parties, for instance. Very notable. Always warm white wine, cold red wine, slightly fizzy.
Because they work without people finishing.
Sure. Well, no, but they just don't know how to do it. They have no idea about the dynamics of a party, for instance. So, in a rather similar way, I don't think architects have any notion about comfort. I mean, they haven't got a clue about a cushion, because it doesn't draw right, and it doesn't have a kind of. I mean, to be a successful designer, you have to be into denying as many of the aspects of normality as you possibly can. This is what design is. I mean, effectively, design takes out as much as it can. And that's how we recognise design over just things happening. And so the sofa, which is...
When people say that design is problem solving, they're lying.
Oh, bullshit! Problem setting. And it's the fact that you recognise the problem's being set. I.e., how can I bring myself to like this thing? If I try really hard I can, that's design. And you recognise design by the fact that it will cause you some mental effort to enjoy it. If you're going to just enjoy it for its pleasurable qualities, of course it can't be designed. It must be just like normal. Anyone else might like it. Oh, God, and that could be designed. Anyone could like it. You know it can't be designed. So design equals
taste.
I think so.
That was
might
partly,
be.
I mean, that's an implication of Slav's argument, in the sense that the sofa constitutes a certain moment in mythology. I mean, current mythology is the sofa. In classical mythology, it's something like a really impossible task undertaken.
Yeah.
It doesn't have any kind of practical outcome. It just shows that you can inhabit a kind of zone of celebrity between mortals and the immortals. And so, if you can be figured sitting on something incredibly uncomfortable, it's easier than one of Hercules' tasks, but it is a current task of how to think.
But I think that for most of those celebrities, the sofa is a kind of leveller. It's a kind of ordinariness that they crave. They want to be like everybody else. They want to ignore their deep insecurities and just drown in the cushions and forget about it. And I think that it's quite a powerful role that sofa has.
They want to say they're just families like yours.
Yeah, just the same as everybody else looking at the magazine.
They want to pretend that. Isn't the whole thing about posing is like it's like getting right, so having your own sofa and showing that you're like everybody else, but actually, of course, you're not at all. I mean, they're buying the space to say that they're just the same as everybody else by posing on the sofa, which looks like everybody else, but actually they don't feel that way at all.
It is the icon of domesticity. It's a platform into which that very ordinary life is played out. It's interesting to see once again the social segments of sofa and what they mean to people. And then in certain parts of the market there's this phenomenon of the big white sofas. And the big white sofas always occupy the principal room of the house and they are never used. In another room there are other sofas, like the one we've been speaking about, which you jump all over and use them to supper off and watch the television. But the big white sofas are never disturbed and they have 1,000 scatter cushions, usually silk, some giving material on, and they sit there looking pristine. It's interesting that look down at the other end of the market again, you see the same phenomenon, the sofa that is never used in the room that is never used. So in between there's something else going on.
Is part of that stability wrapped up in the fact that sofas are always static, they never move?
Yeah.
And that you discovered that, I discovered to my horror that, with all the neurosis of dusting and hoovering, there's always one place where dust congregates better than anywhere else, and it's under the sofa. And it always faithfully matches the footprint of the sofa. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
Way.
I think that's another reason why you're not allowed to have this gap. That's exactly. Yeah. If you talk to Italians about sofas, and they say sometimes they say things like, "Well, you must have a gap underneath. You've got to clean under it, haven't you?"
Yeah.
Which people say, "We don't clean underneath."
If the sofa then, even though it's meant to be this piece of furniture that you move around, if in fact it's static, what's the line between a sofa and, say, a banquette? Or, I'm just thinking of other situations, we're talking about people sitting in a line. If you look at the UN conferences or the House of Parliament, what they're actually sitting on are fixed. Sofas, I mean, they're incredibly uncomfortable. They're not being kind of hunkered down to make you a comment, because that would go against the whole kind of notion of debate. But in a sense, it is a sofa, and how the Commons is filled with fixed, incredibly uncomfortable sofas.
But the point is that they are fixed and they're actually built in.
Yeah, but if we're saying you can't actually move the sofa once you've brought it, it's a complete contradiction.
My dad used to move all over the room.
But I think if you
really annoy everybody.
If you have one, it's one thing. If you have two, then you create a kind of tension between the two. I don't know. We've got four here, so it's suddenly it's kind of like relate to. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
But I mean, you've got one sort of kind of the telly sofa arrangement. But I mean, really, the whole the presence of the sofa in the room is really quite an important part of the space. I mean, the way that architecture designs rooms really should.
Well, one of the natural features of outside furniture, of course, is the swing seat, which is a sofa. And I think
Twin
it's
seat for two.
yeah, well those proper swing sofas.
Oh, yes, with the bonding and the tassels.
Sure, yeah,
Yes,
with the
yes.
tassels and the works.
Yes.
You know, I mean they are. If a sofa's immovable, those are really spectacularly difficult, and have to have the cover over at night if you want to protect your fabric from wearing out. And that seems to me that the sort of difference between that and the hammer, and then this new kind of really creates the idea of the double a beach chair. What are those things called? Bowler?
Loungers.
No, the other thing, the deck chair, exactly, deck chair. Somebody's made a double deck chair, which is a sort of, is absolutely full of promise, but a total denial of sofaism. You know, I mean, a double deck chair, I think when somebody's photographed in Harrow in a double deck chair, that's going to be a very special kind of denial moment when the 90s will seem to arrive, because it has all the material goodness, the deck chair, it's made of worthy materials, canvas and wood, paper. And so somebody who wants to declare that their riches don't matter, perhaps Barbara Streisand, will be seen next on a double deck chair with the important man in her life. I predict it. Yeah, who wants to express their 90s-ness?
I get the feeling that the audience aren't earning their drink by providing more anthropological material.
Yeah.
Do you want anthropology?
No, just that there ought to be more
Sofa story.
Who's recently bought one? Nobody recently bought one.
Yeah.
Is it being formatted? And are they prepared to talk about it?
I bought one to get rid of the rubbish.
Yeah.
I bought one in the spare room, and I actually refused to sleep on. Well, what's the difference? I wouldn't. She expected one that sort of would open up. And I thought, I'm buying upholstery. I'm not going to buy upholstery. Always pulled out, every week, just relative to sleep. Ran back in again. Upholstery has to be static. Sofa. On the sofa. So I left the sofa there. There's no bed. She won't sleep in the sofa. So I got the visible relative by buying the sofa.
Piers touched on this thing about materials, talking about the materials and deck chairs. One of the other rules about sofas in this country, not selling, they shouldn't have any metal on them.
Metal?
Yeah, if you see any metal, if you chrome metal, there's a big problem.
Like starch?
Yeah, I mean, if for example, if you take the core Scotland board you're showing them, they only sell to architects. I don't think anybody who's not an architect owns it.
Like citrons?
Yeah. and in the sense that it's such a conceit, that sofa, because you ask the question, what is the point of putting the frame on the outside and also making it out of metal? It's far more expensive to do it that way, and it doesn't work. So why?
Yes, what about architecture and design?
What about the sofa?
About expression?
They pretend to have no metals involved in them, and then when they're folded out, they become these sort of death traps. And they're a little bit similar to that campaign about teddy bears. You could pull the heads off and impale yourself on. They're exactly the same thing. But as soon as they unfold, they become, they become objects of torture.
Does your Sharrow sofa sell at all? It's an
Very
interesting
well.
shape.
Extremely well. It's a real surprise that it does.
It's very English because it does give you this thing that you can sit here and the arm comes around.
Yeah.
Like an armchair facing. It's like two armchairs facing each other. It's very developed.
That was a real example. This, for anybody who doesn't know, Pierre Gough on there in Paris, and he did this little sofa, which was like two hemispheres joined together. It was a little banquette. It was a tiny thing. It was barely this sort of
it's too damn small.
And it was very high and totally uncomfortable. And we sort of tinkered around with this bit and made it into a proper piece of upholstery. I don't mention Sharrow very much, but that's where the idea is. And we did it, and we thought, well, this is a bit chancy. This is going to be on the fringe because people think this is a bit too designed anyway. It's a bit 30s. And it really did well, and it's continued to do well. We were really surprised and wondered why that won't work.
It's quite small, isn't it?
Yeah. You have sofas from different decades. That to me is a 70s sofa, which I couldn't buy. But the 30s sofa just means, you know, all the sort of comforts of home.
There's some wonderful sofas from the 30s. It was a great period for the English sofa. I'm surprised your Sherry one is successful because it's a bit too chic. Yeah, and that line at the back looks kind of hard and
Chris, very Chris, isn't it?
It does break the rules, that one. It is very comfortable in all senses, in particular because it has liability.
Yeah.
Both ends are liability. And that's
whereas there was an Italian sofa which got narrower towards one end. That was interesting to us because my wife's very small and I'm very big, and we were quite interested in the sofa.
The tapering couple.
Yeah, the tapering couple. The only one that's ever really kind of caught our imagination. It was in lime green or something. Oh yeah, that's quite exciting.
I think that must be the Anno-Sagini one.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, that seems to me to understand the dynamic.
Well, in Nigel Coates did one with a sort of leg that crosses over. Maybe it's for shares or something.
Yeah.
It's a similar thing, it stays.
I'm curious to ask if there's anybody in the room who sat in front of a piece of blank paper and had to try and design one. Think about that problem. Are any of you?
Yes, I picked up on what Piers was saying. There's a great truth about this thing about approaching the design in any conventional design sense, to pick up a pencil, to start perceiving things in terms of elevation, is an impossibility. So you immediately go and reach the Conti crayons, the Orange paper, and start making very soft.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a good
and then
point.
I had to go, and even that didn't work. And ultimately I ended up sanding foam, which was quite frightening.
Yeah.
And it's the antithesis of anything I've ever been taught in design. In my design. And I think there's a certain optimum design that's already been reached. And this discussion, I don't believe, has anything to do with contemporary design, because I suspect that this optimism, this optimum design has its roots in a kind of enclosure, a ghetto within the room, the final kind of bastion of security that has reached its optimum form. And thank God the designers don't design them because there's nothing to design.
Well, I don't think so, because I think Sal's sofa, which responds and has a life of it, I think it should possibly have more of a life of its own rather than dictated to. It should dictate, it shouldn't, sort of do this to you from time to time, kind of give you a massage and so on and so on. So, I mean, but Sal's sofa that she designed suggests a new life of the sofa, which is one which is indeterminate, which is more like taking your mat and then filling it full of cushions. Yeah, but I mean, what you live with, which is the futon plus cushions, which is sort of kind of desirable in one way. I mean, there must be a sofa equivalent of that, which goes somewhere to say, let's take Mark Fisher's Mark mat, kind of moved and throbbed and had a life of its own. And that kind of cushiony sofa, I mean, the sofa has to develop, surely, it's got to go.
No, these are intellectual machinations. I think
it's going to be a lot more fun.
A generic form that has to have certain enclosure of size and a back.
The problem with having no form, which is what we have at home,
Yeah.
is that you just get so frustrated that you just want to hit it and say, for God's sake, support.
Firm up, yeah.
And my
Firm
idea
up.
of a sofa is the 30s style with the arm that comes up like that, almost like a huge car that you can sort of hide in and, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but a much better sofa is like the Parker Knoll seat, which when you're too old to stand up easily, pushes you up. And that to me is what the next degree of the sofa is. It begins to envelop, it begins to move, the back goes down when you need passion, when it feels passion, when it can hear a sexy film on the television, it starts to move.
Very white
exactly. And when you're watching a driving movie, like Wild Thing or something, the whole thing starts to smell of Melanie Griffith. I would have thought that's the sort of sofa we're looking for. It's really about it's going to be our beach frame. I mean,
there's an American brand called Lazy Boy that goes somewhere. Yeah. Did you go to that Japan exhibition at the V&A? Was it a couple of years ago? Which had those wonderful, sofa, they were more daybeds that you could lie on, and they had all sorts of technologies to massage different parts of your body, neck and back.
Oh yes, you sat in them.
Yeah.
The queue was so long, of course.
Right, if you didn't get one, they were quite fantastic.
Yeah.
And saying that the sofa has been designed to its optimum, it kind of exists already in more or less optimum form. I think, yes, you're kind of right. So designers can arguably only dress it up in different fashionable ways to try and repackage the same product. But maybe there is a whole other territory which is using different technology to make it do all sorts of things for you, as you're talking about.
Yeah.
And another area where technology may come into designing the sofa, and this is something that I'm not no expert on, but I'm aware that these things exist. Designing on a screen which will create images, what they call axonometric drawings and three-dimensional views, so you can actually, rather than designing your sculpture on a piece of paper, which is kind of impossible, you can design it on a screen which will create those dimensions.
It's a tactile experience, and there's something rather distant in an electronic image. There's probably a sofa of the imagination that can be well explored in conceptual space, but your art is going to want feather down.
But like, it seems like no one has actually asked, maybe like the sofa should stop. I was thinking of seeing the Allman film called Cuts recently, where when the couple split up, she says, "I just want you out here. We'll split everything halfway through and halfway down."
Yeah.
He comes back with a chainsaw and starts cutting every piece of furniture in half. Starting in, actually, I noticed starting on the sofa.
Yeah, on the side.
I put that with the observation that if you go to an old people's home, there's like an arrangement of Parkinol single chairs and sofas. By and large, people try in their last years of life to sort of avoid the sofa. It's not just that. People do extraordinary things, which might make it difficult to get up from. It's just a kind of symbolic insight. I mean, by the time you're 18, you know you're pretty much on your own. Therefore, an architecture of, a design of togetherness is a fundamental insight to your intelligence.
Well, that's what the three-piece suite is for, isn't it? It's for mum and dad have a chair each, and everyone else has to sort of put up with the sofa. And it's like the older you are, the more that you deserve to have your own chair.
In the same way that people go out and buy their own houses. I mean, the whole thing about the sofa becoming a room, an actual, more than just an object that you sit on. It is like owning another piece of territory, a very specific piece of territory.
The sofa, it was always like where the kids sit. And where we had all games and things.
Games.
On the sofa.
Games.
The sofa was safe, no matter where else was sharp and flexible.
That's very interesting. The sofa was safe.
Yeah.
Feeling.
And then we learnt to ride on the back of the sofa.
Do you want to demonstrate? No.
And then, of course, there was behind the sofa as well. But sofa was not a togetherness thing in our house at all.
Behind the sofa is definitely safe. That's where you hide from Doctor Who, isn't it?
But I think maybe, in a way, this thing about the sofa being a place of togetherness, and what Sally's saying about all these hello couples who then split up, having had this photograph taken on the sofa. Actually, if you take the idea that the sofa is some kind of room and some kind of territory, the problem comes with actually sharing that very small piece of territory with somebody else. And actually there isn't enough room to do that.
No, I think it's
you
like
want a lot more, you want a 20-foot sofa, so it's clearly, my bit over here and your bit over there, which is why there's a kind of three kids sit on the sofa, you're fighting, because in the middle is a really bad place to be, like in the middle of the car. You know, you haven't got the window, and you know, we don't have those pully out things anymore from the back to separate you. You can't find your space in the middle.
I think that's the problem with Hello.
I'd like to put a bet in that there's never been a cover of Interiors magazine with a sofa, but there have been many of its ideal homes. But Interiors magazine would never have the sofa on the cover. We might have it inside, inadvertently have to have one because, you know, you included it. But by and large, they wouldn't show us it because it's not.
It's just not up there, yeah.
It's not up there, and also, of course, it's well known that when you want to sell your house with an interior, rather